What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein, and I'm joined by a man who, when he's not podcasting, he doubles up as a human space heater. Ben McDonald, ladies and gentlemen. Ben, what's up, buddy?
I love we're doing a little shout out to my wife Flo here. I'm doing well, my friend. My Dolphins almost got a win this weekend, which was really exciting and then deeply, deeply disappointing. The Bulls look great in preseason. I mean, it's coming up roses right now, Jason. How are you?
I'm well. The Jets finally got that elusive monkey off their back and got a win as well. And we are 1 week away from the regular season, so everything is great. The Yankees are in the ALCS, even though they lost game 3. This time next week when the regular season starts, I'm either going to be real happy that they're in the World Series or I'm going to need the Nets to really pull me out of this Yankee postseason slump. But we'll see what happens. They have to win 3 of the next 4. Before we get into our final division preview, I just want to preface this by saying, I know last week we briefly commented on what happened in China with the NBA and Daryl Morey, and we kind of tiptoed around it. And Ben, correct me if you disagree, but look, we're not journalists. We're not politicians. We're podcast hosts. So if you want to get China input from people that are more educated than at least I am, then you're listening to the wrong podcast. I mean, Ben, do you agree? Like, I just feel like we're here to talk hoops, and it's really not our place to be commenting any further on China.
I mean, it's just been a crazy, crazy turn of events. So I think at this point, I'm happy to talk some NBA. I'm happy to talk especially probably the most interesting, if not the best division, certainly the most interesting, I think, in the entire NBA, and that's the Atlantic, Jason.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of add that little anecdote in there. But yeah, let's get started. I mean, this is division preview 6 of 6. We've been saying 4 weeks till opening night, 3 weeks till opening night, 2 weeks, and now we're 1 week away. This time next week, while we're recording, there will be regular season basketball on our television screens. We'll be happy. We'll have our space heaters, and we'll be ready to go. But what do you say we get into this final division preview, Ben?
Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to start with the Sixers. I know everyone listening is probably like, oh, you're not going to start with the Nets and talk about them for an hour. Trust me, I wanted to, and then Ben had to call in an intervention. So we're going to start with the Sixers, the Mike Scott antagonists, if you're a Redskins fan. But, I mean, there's really no better place to start because now that the Celtics have taken a bit of a step back and the Raptors lost Kawhi, this is, as it stands today, the only bona fide title contender in the division, at least till Kevin Durant's healthy. I mean, this team lost Jimmy Butler. They lost J.J. Redick, which will hurt. But they re-signed Tobias Harris to a max deal, and then they shock everybody by getting Al Horford to play in the middle with Joel Embiid. So now they're heading into opening night with arguably the largest in size starting lineup in the NBA. I mean, what do you make of the Sixers? I know we touched on a lot of their offseason moves earlier in the summer, but now when the games are starting to count pretty soon, I mean, what's your overall take on Philly?
I really like the Sixers as a playoff team. I think they are going to be the best defensive team in the league this year. I'm not sure it's going to be overly close. I think they have the best defensive personnel I can remember in quite a long time. I mean, I think this could be the best defensive team since maybe the '04 Pistons, something in that
What about
range.
the '07 Spurs?
I mean, they're really good. They're really, really good, and they're good across the board. I mean, those Spurs teams had Bowen, they had Duncan. I mean, this team is potentially even better. I think the one concern they have, which might be a big factor come playoff time, is their wing defense. I think that's probably the weakest part of their defense, just because they don't have like an elite wing stopper. Josh Richardson hasn't necessarily shown that he's that kind of guy, so they're more suited, I think, to guard ones, twos, fours, and fives than threes, which if they play, say, the Clippers, that would be a drawback. But really, I mean, it's just hard to pick nits in this team. I know their depth is something that you're a little worried about, Jason, but I think one thing that'll be interesting to see from that perspective is they're going to get Zaire Smith back, who a lot of people thought was going to be good, and Matisse Thybulle, who's been one of the stories of training camp for them, that he's been just locking people up. And I think if one of those guys steps up, and they can get anything. I mean, I think their biggest concern is really the backup point guard position. If they can get anything from Neto or Trey Burke, I think this is a team to really watch out for in the East. I think they're going to be really, really good this year, Jason.
So this is my thing. I think when you look at their roster, it's like too much of the good things that they have, if that makes any sense. Like, if you have a lockdown, one of the best centers in the game, if not the best, pure center in Joel Embiid, then you go out and you sign a guy who's played the five the majority of his career. Now, granted, he can step out and shoot. He can guard smaller players on the perimeter if he needs to be. But you have Tobias Harris, who's at his best at the four, now playing exclusively three. And you have to put Tobias Harris, Al Horford, and Joel Embiid on the floor together. I mean, Tobias and Al Horford can both shoot, but it's almost like they're going to have trouble spacing the floor, especially if Ben Simmons hasn't learned how to shoot. I know he hit a three in a preseason game and everyone went bonkers, but to me, the Sixers just seem like too much of a good thing. It will work out in their favor, though, when Embiid has to sit out games and you could slide Horford down to the five, Tobias down to the four, Richardson to the three, and then bring in a guy like Tybal or Burke in the backcourt along with Ben Simmons. But they just don't have enough on their bench for me. And they basically strengthened their strengths and did nothing for their weaknesses. I mean, am I making sense?
I know what you're saying. I just feel like with this team, one of the things I like about them is I just think they're not going to have guys who are asked to do too much. And I'm interested to see. I would not be one bit surprised if some of those names that we just threw out, a few of them pop. Trey Burke and Raul Neto have been good backup point guards, and that's all they have to be on this team. And if you put them out there and they're surrounded by Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, guys like that, when they go out there, I think they're going to be put in a position to succeed. And you look at a guy like a Mike Scott, he's just a guy who's going to make them look good. I worry a little bit what they're going to get offensively when Embiid comes off the floor. That's kind of my biggest concern with this team is when Embiid is not playing, how good will their offense be? I think with Embiid, they could be, if not a top 10 offense, top 15 for sure. I think defensively, they'll be the best defensive team in the league. I really feel pretty strongly that if they're not the best, they're going to be in the top 3 for sure. I would bet just about anything on that. I think they're going to be excellent there. I think offensively is where the questions will come. And one of the things that could solve that, and this is the reason I'm not that concerned, is if they can turn defense into offense. This is a team with some of the young guys who are going to be coming in with Zaire Smith and Matisse Thybulle, and with those backup point guards. They could run a little bit more this year than they did last year.
So if that all pans out, and you say everything pans out for the Sixers, then they could theoretically win the title. I mean, they're locked and loaded and ready to go for it for at least a couple of years if Simmons and Embiid can stay healthy and continue to improve their overall games. But what about the coach? Because Brett Brown seemed like his seat was getting a little warm. Brooklyn took game one in the playoffs last year, and had the Sixers lost that series to the Nets, I think Brown would have been shown the door. So I have two questions to pose to you, Ben. Is Brett Brown a championship coach, and is he on a short leash heading into this year?
I would say I think he is on a short leash. I think you make a good point. I can't really figure out why. I mean, we broke down the playoffs last year, Jason, and game one, I think both of us thought, oh wow, this might really be a series between Nets, Sixers. These guys are a little closer, and we had both talked about that. When they played the Raptors, it felt like he was pulling all the strings in that series. And they ended up losing, but I mean, I think people forget that they barely lost that series, and Embiid was a shell of himself. Easily their best player, played nothing like himself, and they still almost won against the eventual NBA champions. So, I mean, I think his seat is hot. I mean, do you think it's justified, Jason, for his seat to be hot, though?
Well, when he took over that job, they were still in the rebuilding, trust the process stage, and they finally have enough of a roster. Like, they were able to get a star in Jimmy Butler. They got J.J. Redick to come. They traded for Tobias Harris and kept him, and they developed Simmons and Embiid into all-stars. So they went through their rebuild, and now they're ready to win. Okay, they had that devastating Game 7 loss in the second round to the Sixers. And, we could have very well been sitting here talking about them in the conference finals had that Kawhi shot not gone in, and they went to overtime and they won that Game 7. So they're close. But you saw the NBA is a no patience league. It's all what have you done for me lately? And I think if the Sixers don't make a deep run this year, Brown's job could be in trouble because I don't think this organization is going to sit and wait any longer. They've preached patience now since Allen
Yeah.
Iverson left town. This is their best shot to win a championship in a very long time. And this season, I think, will prove whether or not Brown is the right man to lead that squad.
I think one of the concerns with this team in the regular season for me, Jason, is just I don't know how much we're going to get of their best players. I have a funny feeling there's going to be a lot of load management and a lot of rest. Al Horford is not a spring chicken anymore. Embiid has had a long list of injuries, and they have a lot of positional flexibility. One of the things you notice with this team right off the bat is that they are deep at the wing. If their young guys decide to step up, they have Zaire Smith, Matisse Thybulle, and James Ennis who can all play that kind of that 2-3 along with Richardson and Tobias Harris. And if you kind of look at the roster construction, I'm not going to be one bit surprised, Jason, if we see a lot of games for Horford and Embiid where they take off because I think this is a team that's going to be looking for the playoffs. And frankly, we'll get to the team that I think might be just below them in the playoffs, but I don't think anyone's going to be very close to them. Assuming the Bucks are excellent and they maintain some of their stature from a year ago, it's going to be the Sixers and the Bucks way ahead of everyone else in the conference. And I think that that's going to just lead the Sixers to really not maybe put forth their highest effort during the regular season, particularly given those injury struggles. I mean, do you see these guys kind of resting their best players given what we've seen from Embiid and Horford in the past?
I think given the weakened state of the East, it's definitely possible, but we'll see. Because, some of these teams in the Atlantic can pop and pass them in the standings if they do too much load management.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the Raptors led by Siakam overtake the Sixers in the game. You could see the Celtics with Kemba Walker, who's shown, especially in FIBA, that he's a superstar. And, of course, you have Brooklyn, who we'll talk about next. So anything's possible. But before we move on, we'll get into our ceilings and floors. And I know your ceiling is a lot higher than mine. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go and say that they could win a championship if they can get past the Bucks in the conference finals, which is not out of the realm of possibility, and they get a tired, fatigued Western Conference team. Sure, the Sixers can be raising the Larry O'Brien Trophy. That is their absolute ceiling, and I know you wholeheartedly agree with that.
I think they might be the best bet to win an NBA title this year, and I'm going to make my case. If you look at the two conferences, while I think that on the whole, the Clippers are better suited to be title favorites, they're going to have to beat a handful of really, really good teams. And I think the Bucks are going to suffer significantly without Brogdon. Before even speaking of the Raptors, who obviously, I mean, I can't even really call them. We'll talk about them in a second, but it's hard to think that they're a championship contender. So when you look at the Sixers, it's just the path they're going to have to a title this year is just so much easier than whatever the Western Conference team is. So if you feel like they're the team that's going to come out of this conference, I think they're a great bet to win the finals because it's really hard to pick a Western Conference team with how close so many of them are. So I think they're one of the best bets to win the title in the whole league, and they would be probably my best bet.
So you're making good points, and I know I told you before the show that I give you a hard time about it, but all I'm going to say is my reservation lies with their lack of a bench. You have Burke, you have Scott, you have Neto, you have Kyle O'Quinn, you have Thybulle, who's looked good, but these are all unproven commodities. So if a couple of these guys don't pop, like I know you think they're going to, then the Sixers could end up right back where they were last year, losing in the second round, which is my floor for the Sixers. I'm not going to go as far and say that they're a first-round knockout because that wouldn't be fair given the state of the East, but I think their floor is a second-round knockout. Their opposing team gets hot, and they lose again, and they're right back to square one with a roster full of bloated front court contracts.
Maybe I've just been drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think losing in the conference finals is my floor for them, actually. I think even without Embiid, I would probably favor them against the Nets or the Celtics, to be
I'm not
honest.
sold on Ben Simmons still. If he gets a shot this year, a jump shot, and shows he could be more of a leader and stop complaining, then I think I'll be a little higher
That's
on
fair.
Philly. But the way things stand right now, I can't get behind it. I can't.